Jeannie asked me, the top things I've learned from TEPAP in the last 20 years. And the reality, there isn't going to be anything earth-shattering out of this. I mean, most of the stuff I've written about, talked about, if you've been coming to this conference, the things I would talk about have been preached and written about and other things all along. It's just that, for the most part, it's a matter of whether somebody does them. I mean, let me just give you about 5 points that would probably summarize everything I'm going to talk about here. When I look at the guys who are the really top producers, and I don't mean just the biggest, but I think over time have been the best, the ones that stand out, it's about implementation and execution. It's about never accepting the status quo, continuous improvement, thinking things through, and then following through. And the other thing I've seen, I guess I would call most of these guys I've seen calculated risk takers. They're not reckless, but they're always pushing the edge. And those would be, I think if you say, well, okay, so we're done. Well, you got to listen to me for longer than that, so we'll get past that. But it isn't just, like Jeannie said, next year's my last year running TEPAP. A guy named Dr. Mark Welsh is going to take it over at A&M. And so it isn't a matter of the program change as much as all, and maybe there'll be a way he'll put some new energy in it. It's just that, when you get a slight dementia and gray hair, you figure, I'm going to be 67 after next year's program. It's time. The big thing I want to do after that, I'm going to contract back with A&M, and I'm going to work more in the peer groups, because one of the things that I think has been missing, the missing piece, if you would, is that people come down to that. They come here to Top Producer, Apex, and others, and they get a lot of stuff dumped in their heads. Now, the good ones, not the good ones, that's a poor way to say it, the best have gone ahead and implemented things. I think implementation and follow-through is the thing we've been missing in TEPAP. You just get it, people have used it a lot, but that extra point, and then the continuous ongoing improvement, I think, are really important things. All right, let's see if I've got this right. Well, maybe not. I think they said this is going to be okay. The one thing, you've heard this from everybody for years. When I look at the TEPAP producers and the top producers, I don't think you can overemphasize communication. And I don't mean just talking to people or being a good lecturer or anything like that. Peter Drucker, who most of you know is considered the father of modern management, said 60% of all management problems are communication problems. Either the lack of, unclear, other things. I want to make just a couple points here. Just to summarize this, I'm not trying to explain it all, but I think employees and family members need to know clearly and on a regular basis the answers to about 8 questions. I'm going to go over those. And then, one, what are they expected to do and how? You say, well, we tell them that. It's not always clear. It's kind of, come on, we'll dump it all on you, then you learn on the job, follow somebody around. I mean, just how do you want, not just what do you want me to do, but how? Second, why are they doing it? Now, people my generation, well, why, my dad used to say, I said, well, why? He said, because I told you. People want to know more, and particularly when we talk about the younger generation, it's kind of like started with the Vietnam era. Why are we doing it? If you don't have a good reason why they're doing it, then maybe you ought to rethink it. The third thing, and this is a big one in every industry, not even ag, is how are they doing? Regular feedback. I don't mean an annual performance review, metrics and other things you're measuring on, and so they have a feel for what, not just nobody's chewing my butt, but how am I doing toward the goals or anything else? The fourth thing, if you've got really good people, they want to know how they can improve. You've got experience, you've looked at other people. How can I do better? Fifth, this is almost being the leader, painting the vision out there. Most people want to know, unless, there's certain people that are just there as mercenaries. I just want to get paid, do my job. But people that are progressive, farther up in the company, family members, where is this business headed? What is our vision? If you want people pulling together, you got to have some idea where you're trying to go. So, fifth of the points is how does it plan to get there? Well, you're going to kind of flex as you go along, but still, just generally, what are we doing? If you want us to help and get on board and pull this thing in the same direction, how is it you want to get there so we can work in that direction? The seventh one is what's their role? And this is particularly important in change management. If somebody doesn't see where they're going to fit into this or how it's going to change what their role is or anything like that, what do? They resist it. And the last one, what's in it for them? And it isn't just more money, that may be it. It may be more growth opportunity. One of the things may be if we don't do this, this company isn't going to be here for you to have a job. But can you move into new areas, other things? Just a brief summary. One of the things I've found over time is that a leader who can't get that maybe has the title of leader, but if you're called a leader or trying to act in that way, and you can't get your message across clearly to motivate others to act on it, then having a message doesn't even matter. I mean, you're just spewing hot air, and if you've listened to me very much, you've probably heard enough of that. Okay. See if we can move here. One of the things I've noticed is the best managers are truly, in the textbook definition, strategic managers. That is, it's all about the ability to anticipate, adapt to, drive or cause, and capitalize on change. That's what a really good manager is trying to do. The only sustainable competitive advantage, Jack Welch used to say, of any business is the ability to learn and adapt, and that adapt is a big part of it, not just learn, faster than your competition. So you've got to be a learning organization. If you look at the really good managers, a lot of the stuff, the guys who were finalists for the top producer of the year last night, a lot of the ideas they got was from outside of agriculture, for some other producer. It's not just from their own experience. Some of the best ideas I've seen have been adaptations from other small businesses. The being an innovator, if you're going to be an out-of-the-box thinker, that the word we overuse and stuff, part of it is getting in a position where you can look at different paradigms and it's all about asking the right questions. A lot of people are asking questions, they're asking the wrong questions. Okay. And a lot of this, like I said, involves getting outside of agriculture. One of the things most of the really good managers I've seen is they are, as you've seen, networkers, but they're intentional networkers. By that, what I mean is they're not just trying to meet people, they're trying to learn something and build that network of people, not just they can use, but people that can provide them information that they want to learn from. They're selective in terms of networking. The future in any case, I don't care if you're here, if you're in car business, or if you were in the landline telephone business, is the future is always going to belong to the person who sees the possibilities before they're obvious to the average person. There's a lot of things that what you've got to do is suspend your biases and your preconceived notions and other things to not create a filter so a lot of this stuff doesn't get through to you. There's an awful lot of things people get told or are in their face out there, and they've got something on that blocks it out before it ever gets to them, or they turn the idea off because they don't like what they're hearing. There's nothing for a successful person as embarrassing as seeing somebody else do something that you thought couldn't be done. One of the things I like about TEPAP that I see every year is somebody coming down and say, Cole or Bulgy or whoever it is, Whitman, is telling me that. Well, we tried that. Or I thought about that, my dad said, or our neighbors, that'll never work. And I come here and I find two people who've been doing it for the last 10 years. That ability to set aside your biases and stuff is important. If you want to look at creativity or innovation, there's a definition I always like. It said it's being able to see what everybody else is seeing and see what nobody else has so that you can do what nobody else has done. That's great. It isn't really coming from doing something that's, most of the really top people are not inventors. They are innovators, which is usually bringing an idea from somewhere else and adjusting it to fit your business or adapting it or combining a couple of things. 3, the importance and acknowledging the contributions of the people who work for you. This notion of the past view that employees are just hired hands, what I see is the good people don't look at it. These people are assets. They're not just cost. And if you got good ones, they're adding value to the operation. It's having people who think on their own, who can act, not just a bunch of robots. Because we hear this a lot. The strength of a business is its people. But the difference between what I see as a really good one and the average is they actually believe that and they practice it. It's not just a bunch of talking the talk. It really is walking the walk. The other thing, and this is hard for a lot of businesses to do, even if you see that, is I see too many businesses trying to clone themselves. The world's going to be different. A team to be strong has to have people with different talents and even different personalities and make them work together. Like Greg, I think I can see you out there. But like if you look at Greg's management team, that's Halverson, who was last year's top producer. You know, Bob Hofer is the CFO, the human resource person, the IT person, the head engineer, the marketing people. You know, his 2 sons and his daughter in the business. There's a lot of different capabilities and talents that come together and work as a team, like the group managers and other things. The strength of the organization, in part, is that ability to bring on, you know, and build those people in and let everybody else respect what each does. Jim Collins, who most of you read the book Good to Great, says what? What's the thing about people? Remember this, it's almost a cliche now. Successful businesses, it's all about getting the right people on the bus, in the right seats, and the wrong people off the bus. I mean, I think that's an important, so it's not just, you know, group hug and we keep people for life. If a person's not performing, the old 80-20 rule, and I'll talk about that in a minute, says that a manager spends 20% of his time, or 80% of his time on 20% of his employees. And where it's most dangerous is not just the non-performers that would get fired, it's those that are just adequate. You got to kind of keep pushing on. There's times you need to make some hard decisions. I think you can only be fair about it in terms of performance evaluations, warnings, and others. But at some point, you're carrying too much baggage. Here's a big one. This group is a little different, the people that are in here. You know, not in a weird way, I hope. But my point is that what I see, these guys avoid seeing change. They see change and challenges as opportunities. They don't view themselves as victims. Problems happen to everybody. The best learn from the problems and their mistakes, make adjustments, and move on. They avoid the coffee shop syndrome, and some of you may spend time in the coffee shop, but what I mean is the people that sit down and bitch and bellyache and blame somebody else and always feel somebody's out to get them. I mean, that does nothing about depression and bring you down, and you usually then pick the successful people and snipe at them, the guys that are in that group. These guys, the people that are successful, don't. They've learned that problems and challenges create opportunities. The first to solve it, or the first to figure out, has a competitive advantage over the people he's competing with. And the other is that mistakes are actually not encouraged. Go out and screw this up. But they're tolerated because mistakes are learning opportunities. Because what you do is after a mistake's made is not just don't do that again. Okay, why was the mistake made? What did we learn from it? And let's put that into practice. One of the things I've observed, this isn't statistical in any sense of the word, but this is an observation I've had over the time in watching people. What appears to me to be one of the main differences between what I see as the top 10% of commercial producers, I don't mean the 2.2 million people that statistically make up the census definition of a farm, but that 120,000 that produce 3/4 of the output of this country. In that group, you take the top 10% and I compare it against the bottom. What differentiates them from the rest of the top 25%? And I think it's timing. When you get into something, when you expand, when you cut back, when you redeploy, it's real easy to see on the commodity market in past, the timing's a critical thing, but this is a lot. Dairies that expanded in 2007, 2008, while the Beijing Olympics was going on. Not only did the market hit them in terms of market price and everything, ethanol plants that were built in that time frame. The cost of concrete and steel were about twice. They built into this long-term commitment, and they got hammered. That was the wrong time to expand. Some of this is just pure luck. I mean, people who got into farming, some of you in this room are of that age, in 79 and stuff, while still was pretty good, bought land. Jerry talked about buying land in what it was, 1982 at $3,000 an acre. His timing was wrong. And maybe you could have seen that, but the fact is, those tend to be part of it. The people who are really successful to me seem to have that timing just over. I can't pick one thing, but over time, they've moved just a little bit ahead of the herd. And it doesn't have to be that often. It's just got to be doing it over and over and over again. In terms of timing, one of the things, in terms of what you get out of, what you cut back on, this again is relating back to Collins, but one of the things I've seen in producers that I think what Collins says rings true, the absolute best managers spend as much time analyzing what they need to stop doing as they do evaluating new opportunities. And partially that's that. When do you stop? When do you cut back? When do we slow down on our growth pattern? Or when do we kick it into gear? Should we do it by renting? Should we do it by buying? Whatever. The trouble is, with the average producer, and I know this is kind of a cliche again, calling, what's average? It's like Obama talking about the middle class. Everybody's the middle class. Hell, who the hell's the middle class? Okay, but I'm talking about the average producer, unfortunately, tends to change when they feel the heat rather than because they see the light. Basically, it's when they're under pressure, then they change. The more successful ones are out there looking for that light, moving ahead all the time. And I think that's an important difference, is affecting their timing. I don't know why I'm doing this well. The importance of operating in a continuous improvement mode. I think this is, what do you call it? Intuitively obvious, might be a big thing. But I'll go back to one thing when I said the achievers refuse to accept the status quo. I've heard more people, if people say, well, why are you doing it that way? That's the way we've always done it. Then an achiever knows I've got a competitive advantage over that person. Because the reason they're doing it is maybe there is a good reason. But this, like I said with managers, an employee wants to know why. Why are you doing it? Just a little example, if I can make this. What I see the typical producer doing with technology or anything else is operating in a stair-step function. We change, we've improved, Roundup Ready, auto steer, minimum till, whatever it happens to be. I'll change because that now has become obvious to me. Everybody else is doing it, or it's been proven. But now leave me alone. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing until circumstances come along that push me to make that next step up. Right. There's two things. If you had a stair-step function, if I just changed continuously and I just was hitting the tip of each of these stairs, that triangle in there, I'd be picking up that they'd be missing because I'm continuously changing. I'm making those little marginal changes. But there's a second thing. It isn't just they stay on a straight line as opposed to a stair step. That function is exponential because there's a compounding effect. You have more net worth, you're building on that each time, and if there's a return on it or whatever, if it's positive, you're not just going to go like, If you look at the University of Minnesota FinBen data and stuff, the difference between the top 20% and the bottom 20% is getting greater every year because there is the compounding effect. I've observed in people, one of the things and one of the reasons that I'm a big believer in peer advisory groups is I think those offer the accountability, the evaluating your ideas, and challenge you to keep getting better. I always talk about if you want to be in a peer group, you want people you like and people that you respect. That's critical and you can trust. But if you want to put together a peer group, make it up of soaring with eagles, don't scratch with turkeys. You want people who challenge you and you make you get better. It's not good to go into, I want a bunch of people in my group that adulate me, that, feel you got to be vulnerable. You got to be trusting of the people and accept the fact they're going to see some things or see it differently than you do. That's the advantage of it. Okay. Seventh, this is something that's become obvious to me over the last 10 years that I don't, and maybe it's strictly the globalization, the economic situation that's out there, but one of the things I've seen with better producers, and I don't mean producers in that sense, I mean it in the sense of better business managers, is they seem to have taken a much more intense interest in understanding the macro, that's both domestic and global issues, and how its impact on the business. We know that in markets, we know that in others. I'm talking about looking at not just economic factors, what's happening in the EU, for example, but the political factors, the social changes, the cultural, the weather issues, and then looking for leading indicators that may give me a little bit of warning about change. Stratford Corporation geopolitical analysis and other things like that. That isn't the only source. People that read The Economist or Financial Times, just trying to get a better sense of what's going on. In strategic management, the term was used was always environmental scanning. It's looking outside of what you are, outside of your commodity, outside of your region of the country, outside of the U.S., and outside of agriculture. Most of the time something happens. We do have what they call the black swan events, however you want to technically define that some single event changes things, when the towers were hit or certain battles. For the most part, most of the major changes occur, and somebody said this the other day, they were talking about how do we get rid of all the noise? Because the fact is that most significant economic occur because of a convergence of factors. This one wouldn't do it. And if this happens now and this one, okay. But it's when they come together. And the ability to start watching it and picking up on the right ones. You know what Alan Greenspan used to get when he was, toward the end of his career? His secretary would give him a piece of paper every time the price of copper changed in the market. I have no idea what he used that for, but that was one of the major indicators he was using. Basically, you want to spot the changes in time to react. Okay, this is one that applies to more what I do, partially. It's my opinion from what I've seen in TEPAP and in the other groups I've worked with, that most college undergraduates, those of you that have just got out of school, those of you that have kids in school, those that are about to go to school, if they want to come back into the business, they're either not being taught or they're not taking a lot of things that are really going to be important to them after they get out. And what I'd like to do, they're not up there. I would this is just my thought process, so you can, it's an opinion, and everybody has them. One, we don't do enough on human resource management and development. If we do, we take a corporate kind of textbook approach to it. How do you deal with problem employees? Can you look at, incentives are nice, but what sort of things do you need to consider when you're putting them in place? So human resource management and development, operations management and process improvement. The notion of doing process mapping, developing standard operating procedures so that you, at the operations side of the business, continue to get more efficient and better. Alternative business arrangements. We study C Corps, S Corps, LLC, partnerships, proprietorships. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about joint ventures, alliances, close cooperatives, mergers, and not just what they are, but what are some of the things you need to watch for, and what are some of the ways to mitigate some of the risk of them? How do you assess the situation? We don't even talk about that in most classes. The fourth one is entrepreneurship. The idea of starting a new venture and what you need to assess about things, doing the due diligence in an area or the startup period, that I see a lot of businesses fail just because of some real obvious things people overlooked. I know I did a little paper one time for the American Bankers Association on 20 evaluating producers' value-added business plans. And it was 20 questions about what should you look at before you go in so you don't get blindsided. Macro, domestic, and economic or global geopolitical issues. We don't get very much macro in most ag programs. You take one macroeconomic course, and its main focus is on domestic macro policy. Practical cost and managerial accounting. This goes back to a little bit about Wayne talked about rivers the other day. I would guess even in this room, and I hope I'm wrong, that 90% of you don't have a real managerial cost accounting system in place where you can drill down to determining true cost and allocation. Negotiation skills is really, we don't teach that. Case studies, practice, other things. We get a little bit of this, but the risk management strategies and decision tools. We take kids and maybe futures and options and others looking at straddles and other things. But most kids don't take it, or how do you build your insurance in or your financial structure along with your marketing strategy? And how do you bring those together? There's other risk, human resource risk, besides business risk and other things that need to be considered. And lastly, I think it'd be useful if more kids had a class, I don't care if it's a 1-hour course, on creative thinking. We teach decision theory and other things like that. Albert Einstein, who at least most people acknowledge was reasonably bright and a problem solver, said that I have this poster on the back of the door in my office. It says, imagination is more important than knowledge. There are courses. We're having something at APEC this time on coloring outside the lines or creative thinking. Okay. Ninth, everybody exists in 4 stages of knowledge. If you read the little thing I developed for top producer for the TPEN groups, is on this point is included in there. Every one of us at every moment exists in 4 states of knowledge. You know what you know. You know what you don't know. Those parts are, but also you exist in a state of when you don't know what you don't know. And lastly, where you think you know and it just ain't so. I mean, it's a matter. It's because of biases, prejudice, having blind spots. That's one of the reasons, again, why I think peer groups are important. Or something you've always assumed to be true because you were taught it, or that's the way your family believed it, or that's the way it's always been. And you just assume, okay, this is true. Every one of you remembers the acronym ASSUME. A-S-S-U-M-E. What does assume mean? Or what does it's to make an ass out of you and me. Assumptions, if not tested. One of the things I like, there's a guy named Douglas Adams in the book The Breakthrough Companies, which was a book written about, it was like a Jim Collins book on Good to Great, except about small and privately held companies. Makes a point when he was talking about peer groups. That is what they call it in the book, but then you just listen to the description and that's what they're saying. Says that human beings who are almost unique in their ability to learn from the experiences of others are also remarkable for their disinclination to do so. That's the first 2 points on those 4 things I said. First one, you can help other people know what you don't know on those things you know. The second one, if you know you got a problem, you can look for the answer. They can help you answer that. The other one is you're going to find out some things that you didn't know you were. This is what ignorance is. Ignorance isn't stupidity. It's just being unaware of something, helping you find that. And the other one is challenging some of your assumptions so that at least you've thought them through and looked at it. I mean, our political environment is full of that last point. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. Okay. Several people have talked about the best managers are aware of their strengths and weaknesses and work hard at building on their strengths and compensating for the weaknesses or filling in the gaps. I like Collins. I read a lot of his stuff, but it says, good is the enemy of great. And what it means, if you're doing okay, there's not enough, you don't have enough incentive to change. And so if you're just good, you're okay. The idea of, okay, just because you are okay doesn't mean you can't do better. And the really top managers are those that are always looking for ways to do better. Okay. The importance of what-if scenarios in developing contingency planning. This is what I call one of the best management practices. All it is saying, what could happen and what would we do if it did? Now, you can go on about this ad infinitum. But basically, being prepared and having options is half the battle. The trouble is, I see people that do what-if analysis all the time, but they don't develop what their contingency plan and contingency plan options are. Because when you get right down to it, and the crisis is on top of you, then you're reacting emotionally. If you, a general going into battle, a really good football coach preparing for the Super Bowl or anything, has scrimmage, practiced different things, they've scouted the other team, but they also know the other team has scouted them and is going to do something different than what they've been doing in the past. That's having the contingency plans. It's also doing what if is the basis for evaluating risk management options so that your risk management strategy is more calculated instead of just what I think in a lot of cases they are is emotional. 11, they spend more time on monitoring and analysis and developing control systems. The whole purpose of this is to stay on top of things so that you can act more quickly to correct problems, to capitalize on opportunities, and to make adjustments and plans as you get new information. The average farmer, and I'll go back to that, does planning at the beginning of the year to get their cash flow statement ready to take to their lender for their line of credit, to lay out their production plans, and maybe to develop a marketing plan. And then they really sit down and do a more thorough analysis toward the end of the year, for tax management purposes. The one thing, and one of the reasons for having a specialist in the business, whether it's financial marketing, is people who are outsourcing or forming an alliance with other people, is to stay on top of things. If you at all believe me, the timing is a big differentiator. If you don't stay on top of things, how are you going to capitalize on opportunities to take advantage of it? I see way too many people that are so busy doing things that they aren't staying on top as they go along, and things happen. I mean, my little brother talked about one time, on staying on top of the markets. During planning season, he just got so busy he wasn't paying enough attention to it. Well, we've got technology now. If you got an iPad in your vehicle or a cell phone, that stuff can come to you anytime while you're doing something else. I just think it's really important. And a lot of the guys, the good ones, are working all the time on better technology and integrate information they're gathering from different sources. One of the reasons also to monitor and analyze is to make sure you've, one, identified the true cause of the problem. Again, then you're going to listen to my biases about politics. One of my problems with politics and half of the voting public isn't just their self-interest, is that they're too busy treating symptoms and not causes of problems. Because you've got to drill too deep, you have to explain to too many people what the real cause is, not just the one they think it is. But the other is because a lot of times treating causes takes a while to fix it. And we're always looking for quick results. So in terms of, that would be a short version on that one. The importance of prioritizing time, effort, and priorities. The really, really good producers. This is, I talked about the 80-20 rule, and you've heard about it. It's one of Stephen Covey's. Do 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, doing first things first. Okay. What I see is most people never achieving a lot of their personal and long-term business goals is because they're spending too much of their time doing second things first. Well, that sounds like, all right, what the? What I mean is they do things they like to do. They do things, they'll gravitate towards those if there's an option. They'll do things that they already know how to do. They do things that if they got a to-do list that they can get started on and get done. And lastly, they're spending a lot of their time doing what? What's urgent. And they never get around to the things that are most important. The best managers I've seen give their attention to those things that bear fruit. You either learn to delegate, you outsource, form an alliance, or something to be able to focus your attention, whatever level of the business on those things you can do or are responsible for that have the payoff. We're doing an awful lot of spending $100 an hour time on $10 an hour jobs as managers. Okay. 13th, there's 16 of these if you want to have some idea where we're going. The importance of being a successful negotiator and understanding what win-win really means. I talked about this as one of the areas I think is lacking in undergraduate education's negotiation strategy. But the ability to negotiate affects almost every aspect of a business, whether it's dealing with suppliers, buyers, employees, or working with family members. One of the most popular parts of Apex has been the Bay Group part on negotiation strategies. It's a half-day program. We've had several of these now where the people in the group, we'd like to have their full-blown 2-day program where we've held special sessions of 2 days just on negotiation strategy because they realize this isn't just a matter of negotiating with a supplier or a landlord. Effectively, it deals with everybody, whether you deal with employees or family members. Because the success of negotiations affects the acquisition of resources, your relationships, the prices you pay, and also the terms of arrangements. I think negotiation, the best people I see out there as successful managers. This isn't screwing somebody, it's talking about win-win. Unless this is a one-time deal. Too many people think of win-win. Remember the country western song, if we meet in the middle, that's not win-win. One person's here, one there, let's just both compromise. Then both have your dissatisfied with the result. It's working hard to figure out a result that's different from what I want, where we both get pretty much so that at least we're satisfied with the result. It's not everything I asked for, but if we work on it, we may come up with a solution. It's like if you had 2 points that continue between them, it isn't going here, it's arriving at a solution at an apex. It's above what your original solution would be. Okay. Now, you may disagree with me on this one, but hear me out, I guess, on it. Every successful operator I've met, this is my opinion what the success is, growth-oriented. But they define what growth is. One of the things, maybe it's not necessarily just adding more volume. It may be building profits. It may be developing, what constitutes success for you. But the reality is it does have to have something to do with size and profitability if you intend for your business to continue after your time. I mean, most people's gripe about people growing, that they dislike about the big farmer is not that they're growing, it's how fast they're growing, or potentially they see it's at the expense of somebody. That's in economics. If you make more money, you can pay more for something and still be making it. It's those that are not making money get flushed out of the system. This idea that everybody may be equal in terms of rights, they're not equal in terms of opportunity or ability. And we've got to look at ways, I think, if I want to grow, look back over time. Well, it's been my observation that what we call a big farm, not a mega farm, a big farm, doubles about every 10 years. I mean, you know, one time it was a 640-acre farm, then it was a 1280, then it was 2560, then it was 5120. Now, well, this is my definition, in central U.S., a big farm is probably about 10,000 acres. Now, some of you may consider that mega. That wouldn't be where I'd put them. Each of us has their own definition. But the reality is technology, managerial ability, span of influence, and other things just say growth is going to happen. It's the rate at which it happens. Most of the successful people I've seen, they may be growing in other ways, like the winter Brewbakers last night. They haven't been able to expand as much because of where they are in terms of acreage. So how have they grown? The digesters, the dairy operation, the broiler operation, all of those things is how they found. It's like Dave did in his operation, Nelson. So how he's grown is taking a company that has a certain footprint and expanding it dramatically. It's how John Carroll did in going to Brazil, moving somewhere to get going, but they grew. 15, I've observed this an awful lot, the unwillingness or the inability to work with others, and that includes family members, has been and will be the downfall of many farms. One of the things, it's not just the family conflict and other things that give up. It may be employees and stuff, but the ability to work, it doesn't mean giving in to them. Just some people have the ability to work with other people and do it betterly. It's also, as we move forward, we're going to see, even among successful operators, a much greater need for interdependence. When Chris is talking about the group he put together, Barron, or was working with, they do things together. These joint ventures and alliances, we are moving, the speed varies a lot, and it depends on the industry, but we are moving toward closed supply chains and qualified supplier models. That's just reality. It happens at different speed, different. You've seen it in the seed business, you've seen it in the vegetable business, you've seen it in the potato business, specialty corns, food grade stuff. That's occurring. I was an outside consultant on the best manager in Canada study. And one of the things they found is that in Canada, only 13% of the total population of farmers were involved in some sort of formal relationship with a processor or a supplier, a marketing or production contract. If you took the top 10% from a profitability net worth standpoint, 66% of them were involved in some sort of formal relation. If you look in the U.S. at the value of production, I don't mean just, because it obviously varies a lot. In vegetables, a lot. In broiler operations, it's a lot different. It turns out that 36% of the value of total production in the U.S. occurs under some sort of marketing or production contract. If you take the top 10% of the producers in this country, 83% of the value of production occurs under some sort of production. And this is going to occur for a lot of reasons. It's going to occur for food safety reasons, environmental reasons, where somebody needs the traceability or the ability to contain a potential problem. It's also occurring to protect patents, its ability to get alignment. And alignment means quality, quantity, and timing. If you're trying to make the system more efficient, you're trying to take the variability and the uncertainty out of it. And more it's moving that way. You can look at almost any industry that's gone that route and has taken that step. And what you're going to find is they got a whole lot of players right at first, and then there's a culling that takes place. Somebody that they can't work with, somebody that doesn't perform under the contract, or more importantly, if somebody gives up or retires, you don't go out and look for somebody else. You offer it to the best of who you have. Then I have less cost of collect because I deal with people I've been working with. I know what I'm getting. other things, I think you're going to see it more and more. I don't mean you ought to automatically get into that, but just you ought to anticipate your growth pattern and where the industry is going. We have a bioterrorism event that affects the food system. You're going to see things slammed in place almost immediately. This is actually my last one. And this is on one thing I just have seen. We've talked succession, almost any meeting I'm in, there's about 4 things. The government program, insurance, well, 5, marketing, land values, and succession planning. I mean, every TEPAP meeting, a big part of it, the issues people are having, deals with the whole management, transition, succession planning, and successor development. The best operations I've seen really seem to enjoy and take pride in. It's not that there's problems, but they take a lot of pride in developing the business's future leaders. Even if it means there's certain things they've got to give up. Succession in any business that's going to be ongoing has to be one of the key responsibilities of leadership, and yet it's one of the most underdeveloped that most leaders seem to have learned. There's a lot of head knowledge out there, but there's a big difference in terms of what I see between head knowledge of what should happen and what people actually do. An awful lot of managers seem to be a reflection of what they want to do. If their dad was a control freak and do it my way, they don't seem to be able to break through the delegation. They're really getting into the development of people. One of the things I've talked about in the past with best management practices are doing autopsies. An autopsy says, let's sit down and look at the results of key decisions, whether things went well or went badly, and not only dad and the successor, but also the management team sit down and say, all right, let's take this apart. We used to do this on problem loans and loan losses and other things and business development, saying, what did we do? What didn't work? What went wrong here? What assumptions did we make were wrong? What information, maybe we should have made some mid-course adjustments. Was our process wrong? If things worked out, were we just lucky or were we following some sort of... It's what did you learn from this? How does a successor learn? He shouldn't be learning just from his own experiences or his own mistakes. He ought to learn from the acquired wisdom of the people that have been before, plus the people he's working with. I think it's really important we look that way, because I've seen all kinds of businesses, particularly in agriculture, and maybe after listening to Wayne the other day, Harley-Davidson dealers, but I don't happen to know very much about them, is that have failed after the first, and it isn't just, okay, somewhere so many businesses survive to the second generation, so many to the third. I think what it is that many businesses have flourished under one, floundered under another, because the business failed to prepare the next generation, or that the wrong person was selected. This notion of, even though this tends to be a fairly heavily male audience, and many of you, if you're running your operation, may have been the oldest son, I think the world's changed to a point. It ought to be the oldest son if the oldest son is most capable and best fits the job. Because it may be that a son-in-law, a daughter-in-law, the second son is most able for this, and the others ought to do what they're good at. Now that takes a lot of work on the part, because you take the path of least resistance is what generally tends to occur. I think a business that's successful really has to establish a clear basis for successor selection, the future needs of the business, the type of management it's going to need, the skill set, the ability to work with others on the team. That needs to go into both saying these are the criteria that job has. If you were hiring somebody from outside, you'd hold them to that criteria. And the performance evaluations ought to be two-way streets to say, what do we need to be working on here, and getting not just boss or owner telling the successor, this is what you did right or wrong, but two-way feedback. Finally, this is the closing comment into this, is I think the current CEO needs to be really involved, not just the last 2 years of the time before he's going to hang it up, but in terms of developing what he or she is going to do next. Because if they don't have something to go to, either they're never going to leave, even if they've said they have, or they're going to be really unhappy. Why do some of these managers and CEOs die within 5 years after they leave the job? Because they're depressed. Their whole identity, was doing this. If you don't, it doesn't mean you're going to play golf. It could be like, maybe you're going to develop new opportunities for the business, evaluate new options. Maybe you're going to impart the role of chairman of the board. Maybe you're going to move into volunteer activity, but doing something that makes you feel worthwhile. The other thing is, if in fact you really are a business that's open to considering other than primogeniture as a succession plan, you need to be really concerned about developing the people who are not going to get the job, because you don't want them to be demotivated, to be pissed off because it didn't go their way and to try to undermine the operation or just bail out. That's not a very comprehensive list. Most of it's stuff you already knew. But at least in terms, I guess, what I've seen in TEPAP, I'd say those are the things that stuck out with me.